The luminous dawn hung in the void like a monument to interstellar cooperation, all gleaming hull plating and observation decks that sparkled against the cosmic backdrop. 16 different species called this research vessel home, each contributing their unique talents to the Pan-Species Coalition's ongoing mission to catalog, study, and absolutely not blow up anything in the uncharted sectors of the galaxy. For 8 months, the crew had been poking around distant star systems, taking samples, running scans, and generally having the kind of quiet, productive time that made for terrible Hollywood dramas but excellent scientific papers. Nobody expected the morning that would go down in Coalition history as the incident we don't talk about, but everyone knows about anyway. Olix sat at his monitoring station in the biometrics bay, all 6 of his eye stalks drooping with the kind of boredom that comes from watching screens that never change. As a Mytharian, he was basically a 2-meter-tall collection of sensory organs wrapped in blue-green skin that shimmered when he moved. Right now, he wasn't moving much. His job, his incredibly dull job, involved making sure none of the crew members spontaneously combusted, grew extra limbs, or contracted some weird space plague that turned them inside out. In 8 months, the most exciting thing he'd logged was when Chief Engineer Torax ate something that disagreed with his third stomach and spent 6 hours making concerning digestive noises. This was fine. Olix liked boring. Boring meant nobody was dying, mutating, or otherwise having a biological crisis that required his intervention. The chronometer read 0530 station time, which meant most of the crew was either asleep or pretending to be awake while staring blankly at their breakfast rations. Olix was contemplating whether he could sneak in a quick nap himself, when every single alarm on his console decided to scream in unison. Red lights flooded the biometrics bay. Warning klaxons that hadn't made a sound in 8 months suddenly remembered they had volume settings that could liquefy eardrums. Olix's eye stalks shot up in 6 different directions, each one trying to process a different readout. And what he saw made his 3 hearts collectively decide to audition for a speed drumming competition. Biological threat detected. Hostile organism expansion in progress. Predator behavior indicators. Maximum. Recommendation: immediate containment. The location marker blinked on his display. Habitat Module 12. Olix knew that module. Everyone knew that module. It housed the human. Now, Olix had read the files on humans when Dmitri first came aboard. Well, he'd skimmed them. Okay, he'd looked at the pictures and decided that any species that looked that soft and squishy couldn't possibly be dangerous. Humans were the new kids in the Coalition, fresh from first contact, all eager smiles and weird bipedal locomotion. They had bilateral symmetry, which was, frankly, inefficient, and only 2 eyes, which seemed like a design flaw. Dmitri seemed nice enough, always nodding greetings in the corridors, never tried to eat anybody. But the sensors didn't lie. According to the readouts currently painting Olix's world in shades of panic and regret, Dmitri's body mass had just expanded by 18% in 3 seconds. His skeletal structure was undergoing rapid transformation, joints extending beyond baseline parameters. Energy signatures spiked in patterns consistent with predator species entering attack preparation mode. Muscle density readings were climbing. Body temperature had jumped 2 degrees. Olix did what any reasonable sensor technician would do when confronted with evidence that the friendly human down the hall was apparently transforming into some kind of hostile creature. He slammed his primary manipulator onto the emergency lockdown button so hard he nearly broke it. Habitat Module 12's blast doors dropped with a satisfying chunk that echoed through 3 decks. Atmospheric seals engaged. Energy barriers hummed to life. Warning lights bathed the corridor outside Dimitri's quarters in angry red. Then Olix hit the bridge comm with all 6 manipulators at once, because fine motor control had left the building along with his comm. "Bridge, this is biometrics. We have a massive situation. Hostile organism detected. Habitat 12 is locked down. Someone needs to get down here right now, because I think the human is turning into something, and I don't know what, but the sensors are screaming, and I'm screaming internally, and possibly externally, and—" "Technician!" Commander Zurama's voice cut through Olix's spiral like a plasma cutter through ice. "Report. Coherently." Olix sucked in air through his primary respiratory intake and tried again. "Commander, biological threat sensors have detected extreme physical transformation in Habitat Module 12. The human, Dimitri, is exhibiting massive structural changes. Energy output is spiking. All indicators suggest predator behavior. I've initiated containment protocols." There was a pause on the other end of the comm. Commander Zurima, a 4-armed Ultani who had commanded warships before taking this research posting, was not prone to panic. She was, however, prone to taking threats seriously. "Acknowledged. Maintain lockdown. I'm coming to you. Bridge out." Olix stared at his screens, watching the readings fluctuate. Whatever was happening in that habitat module, it was ongoing. The transformation, or threat display, or whatever horrifying thing humans did when they stopped pretending to be harmless, continued. He watched the skeletal expansion graph spike again, watched the thermal bloom spread across the body map. From somewhere in his memory, a phrase from the human information packet surfaced. "Humans are persistence predators with a documented history of hunting prey to exhaustion across extended distances." Oh, ancestors preserve him. He'd locked himself on a ship with a persistence predator. The door to biometrics hissed open, and Commander Zuruma strode in, her 4 arms already moving in that efficient way she had. 2 reaching for data tablets, while the other 2 settled on her hips. She was tall even by Ultani standards, with dark purple skin that bore the faint scars of someone who'd seen actual combat. Her eyes, all 3 of them, fixed on Olix's main display. "Show me." Olix pulled up the full sensor suite, and together they watched the biological horror show happening in real time. To her credit, Zurama's expression barely changed, but Olix noticed her upper right hand drift toward the plasma pistol she always wore. "How long has this been occurring?" 4 minutes, 18 seconds, Commander. It started suddenly. No warning indicators, no gradual escalation, just sudden transformation. Zurama tapped commands into her tablet with 2 hands, while the other 2 crossed thoughtfully. Physical expansion of this magnitude should be accompanied by massive caloric consumption. Is he, what's the phrase, eating something? Olix checked the environmental sensors. Negative, Commander. No significant atmospheric changes consistent with digestion or consumption of biomatter. So he's transforming without fuel input. Zurima's voice carried that particular tone of someone encountering a problem that didn't fit known physics. Alert Security Chief Polmuk. Full containment team. Non-lethal suppression equipment only until we understand what we're dealing with. Yes, Commander. Olix sent the alert, then ventured, "Should we, perhaps, try to communicate with him?" Zurama glanced at the readouts again, at the continued spikes and fluctuations. "And say what, exactly?" "Excuse me, we've noticed you're undergoing a massive physical transformation that suggests you're about to consume the crew. Would you mind terribly not doing that?" When she put it that way, it did sound ridiculous. The biometrics bay door opened again, and Security Chief Polmuk entered. If Olix was the definition of nervous energy, Polmuk was his exact opposite. The crystalline being moved with the deliberate precision of someone who had never been in a hurry and saw no reason to start now. His body was composed of interlocking geometric shapes that refracted light into rainbow patterns, beautiful and completely unreadable in terms of emotion. "Commander," he said, his voice like wind chimes in a minor key, "you have a situation requiring containment." "Look at this!" Zurama gestured to the displays. Polomuk observed the data for exactly 10 seconds. "The human is transforming." "Yes, this transformation presents a potential threat to crew safety." "Yes. I will assemble a response team immediately. Recommendation: quantum nets, neural dampers, and at least 2 plasma rifles set to wide dispersal." He paused. "Do we know if humans are vulnerable to neural dampers?" Nobody knew. Humans were too new to the coalition, and nobody had felt the need to field test suppression weapons on them yet. "Use your judgment, Chief," Zurma said. "But remember, we need him alive and, if possible, not permanently damaged. He's still technically a crew member until we determine what's happening." "Understood, Commander." As Polmuk turned to leave, the door hissed open one more time. A young Delphine rushed in, her tablet clutched in her webbed hands, gills fluttering with agitation. Lena was the ship's junior intellect officer, barely 2 cycles out of the academy and assigned to the Luminous Dawn for what was supposed to be a quiet research posting that would pad her resume. "Commander, I heard about the alert. I pulled the human files. I think there might be." "Not now, officer," Zurama said, still studying the screens. "We have a containment situation." "But that's what I'm trying to tell you. I've been reading the cultural data, and humans have these things they do in the morning, and—" "Lena!" Zurma's voice wasn't unkind, just firm. "We have biological threat indicators lighting up every sensor in this bay. I need you to stand by for analytical support. But right now, containment is priority 1. Lena's mouth closed, her tablet drooping slightly. "Yes, Commander." On the screens, the readings continued. Whatever Dmitri was doing, he wasn't stopping. And somewhere in Habitat Module 12, completely unaware that an armed response team was assembling outside his door, Dmitri finished his morning stretch with a satisfied groan, cracked his neck to the left, then to the right, and shuffled toward his tiny kitchenette to make coffee. It was going to be a long day. The bridge of the Luminous Dawn had transformed from its usual state of calm efficiency into what could only be described as organized chaos with a side of impending doom. Commander Zurima stood at the central tactical display, her 4 arms working in concert like a conductor leading an orchestra that had forgotten how to play in tune. 2 arms manipulated holographic data streams, while the other 2 gestured orders to various crew members who scurried about, with the kind of purposeful urgency usually reserved for hull breaches or surprise tax audits. "Security, status," Zurama barked. Polmuk's voice came through crystal clear, literally, given his physiology. Containment team assembled outside Habitat 12. 8 personnel, full suppression loadout, awaiting your command. On the main view screen, the biometric data from Dimitri's quarters painted a picture that would give xenobiologists nightmares for cycles. The human's body temperature had spiked another degree. Muscle density readings showed fluctuations that suggested, well, nobody was quite sure what they suggested because human baseline data was still embarrassingly incomplete. The skeletal tracking system kept throwing error messages because joints were moving in ways the software insisted were impossible for the recorded baseline structure. "Hold position," Zurama commanded. I want visual confirmation before we breach. Olix, who had followed the commander to the bridge because leaving the biometrics bay felt like abandoning his post, but staying there alone felt like volunteering for a horror show, pulled up the internal surveillance feed. The camera in Habitat 12's main living space clicked on, and suddenly everyone on the bridge got their first real-time look at what a transforming human actually looked like. Dmitri stood in the center of his quarters, wearing what the cultural database identified as sleep attire, specifically pants covered in a pattern of tiny planetary bodies that would have been adorable if not for the context. As they watched, he raised both arms above his head, clasped his hands together, and leaned to one side in a movement that made the skeletal tracking system scream warnings about structural compromise. "Ancestors preserve us," whispered Lieutenant Mox, a Thernian whose species had never encountered anything more dangerous than aggressive space moss. "He's testing his flexibility, checking for weak points." "No, no," said Navigation Officer Quill, her antennae quivering. "Look at the facial expression. That's satisfaction. He's enjoying whatever this is." Zurama zoomed the camera in on Dimitri's face. The human's eyes were closed, mouth slightly open, in what the limited facial recognition software tagged as contentment or possible neural compromise. "Maybe it doesn't hurt," Olix offered weakly. "The transformation, I mean. Maybe humans are built for this." On screen, Dmitri brought his arms down, rolled his shoulders back in a movement that registered as threat display, aggressive posturing on the sensors, then proceeded to tilt his head from side to side. A distinct crack sound came through the audio feed. Every being on the bridge flinched. "What was that?" Zorma demanded. Did something just break?" Lena, still clutching her tablet at the back of the bridge, tried again. "Commander, if I could just show you the section on human musculoskeletal maintenance." "Officer Lena, I need actionable intelligence, not cultural trivia." "But it is actionable. Humans do this thing where they intentionally manipulate their joints to—" Another crack echoed through the speakers as Dmitri worked his neck to the other side. "He's deploying bone weapons," Polmuk announced over the comm with absolute certainty. "I recognize the acoustic signature from my time in the crystalline conflicts. Some species can project hardened calcium structures through their dermis." "Humans have internal skeletons," Lena protested. You can't deploy what's already inside." "Tell that to the sensors," Olix muttered, watching his display register each crack as a structural modification event. Zarima pulled up a communication panel. "We need to make contact. If he's still rational, we might be able to talk him down." "Talk him down from what?" Mox asked. "We still don't know what he's doing." "Whatever it is, it's aggressive." Zorma opened the channel to Habitat 12. "Dmitri, this is Commander Zorma. Can you hear me?" There was a pause. On the screen, Dmitri looked up toward the ceiling speaker, a mild expression of confusion crossing his features. He shuffled, toward the comm panel on his wall. The movement tracking software helpfully labeled this as stalking approach, confidence level high. The comm crackled. "Yeah? Morning, Commander. What's up?" His voice was cheerful, casual, the kind of tone someone used when asking about the weather or discussing lunch options. Zaruma's upper left hand tightened on her plasma pistol grip. "We're checking on your status," she said carefully. "Are you experiencing any unusual physical sensations?" I slept weird, so my neck's a bit stiff, but otherwise, I'm good." "Why? Is something wrong with the environmental controls again?" "Slept weird. Neck is stiff." The words were in Coalition Standard. but they might as well have been in ancient Matherian for all the sense they made in context. "Your door appears to be malfunctioning," Dmitri continued, and on the screen they watched him tap the door controls. The massive blast door, designed to contain hull breaches and hostile boarding actions, didn't budge. "Can't seem to get it open. Is maintenance working on something?" Zarema glanced at her tactical officer, who could only shrug with 3 of his 5 shoulder joints. "We're investigating the door issue," Zarema said. "In the meantime, what are your immediate plans?" "Well, I was going to make some coffee and breakfast, maybe do my morning workout. Got some reports to file later. Pretty standard day." He paused. "Why? Did I miss a staff meeting or something?" "Breakfast? Workout." The words tumbled through Zarema's mind like asteroids through a debris field. Dmitri was talking about consuming biomatter and engaging in physical exertion, and he sounded about as concerned as someone planning a trip to the recreation deck. "When you say workout," Zarema ventured, "what exactly does that entail?" "Oh, you know, the usual. Some push-ups, maybe jumping jacks, little bit of stretching to loosen up. Nothing intense." "Why?" Polmuk's voice cut in on the command channel. "Commander, he just described a combat preparation routine. Push-ups are a strength-building exercise. Jumping jacks increase cardiovascular readiness. This confirms hostile intent." "Or," Lena said loudly enough that several officers turned to look at her, "it confirms he's a human, doing normal human things. If everyone would just look at the cultural files for 30 seconds. We don't have 30 seconds if he's about to breach containment," Zarema snapped. On screen, Dmitri had given up on the door and was walking back toward his kitchenette. He pulled out what the database identified as a coffee brewing apparatus and began filling it with water. Every movement was relaxed, economical, completely at odds with the sensor readings that insisted he was in full predator mode. "Commander," Oleg said quietly, "his vitals are stabilizing. Temperature dropping back toward baseline. Muscle density returning to normal parameters." "Because he's completed the transformation," Polmuk suggested. "He's reached final form." "Or," Lena tried again, her voice cracking slightly with frustration, "he finished stretching. Humans stretch when they wake up. It's a biological function designed to increase blood flow after extended periods of inactivity. It's in the files. It's in multiple files. There are entire documents about it." Zarema held up a hand for silence. On the view screen, Dmitri had started his coffee brewing and was now, oh ancestors, he was now lowering himself to the floor. His hands planted on the ground, legs extended behind him in a position that looked anatomically improbable. "Is he injured?" Mox whispered. "Did he collapse?" Then Dmitri began lowering and raising his body in a controlled, rhythmic motion. Down, up, down, up. The motion tracking systems went berserk. Threat level climbing. Predator behavior confirmed. Possible weapon calibration detected. "Push-ups," Lena said flatly. "He's doing push-ups. It's exercise. Voluntary physical conditioning." "He's voluntarily activating combat musculature," Polmuk countered. "Commander, we need to make a decision. Either we breach now while he's distracted, or we risk him completing his preparation sequence." Zarema watched the human continue his exercises, each push-up registering as a fresh threat spike. Watched him transition into what the database called jumping jacks, a movement that involved full-body coordination and looked absolutely ridiculous, but apparently triggered every predator warning system in the coalition arsenal. "Polmuk, hold position," she said finally. "Lena, you have 60 seconds. Show me these files." Lena practically lunged forward with her tablet. her webbed fingers swiping through documents with the kind of desperate speed usually reserved for disarming explosives. She thrust the screen toward Commander Zurama, nearly dropping it in her haste. "Here! Look! Human Morning Routines, a comprehensive overview. Section 3, subsection 12, Post-Sleep Physical Restoration Activities." Zurama took the tablet, her 3 eyes scanning the text, while 2 of her hands continued monitoring the tactical display. What she read made her antenna twitch with something between comprehension and disbelief. Upon waking, humans engage in a series of voluntary muscle extensions and contractions designed to redistribute synovial fluid throughout the joint capsules, increase circulation to extremities, and restore optimal range of motion after periods of physical inactivity. She read aloud. These activities, collectively termed stretching, are considered normal and non-threatening behavior. Olix leaned in, 2 of his eye stalks peering at the tablet. But it says voluntary muscle extensions. That's exactly what the sensors are detecting. Muscle tissue extending beyond rest state parameters. "Keep reading," Lena urged, her gills fluttering with anxious hope. Zurama scrolled down. Common stretching behaviors include overhead arm extension, lateral torso flexion, cervical rotation, and full body extension, often accompanied by mandibular dislocation. "Mandibular dislocation?" Mox gasped. "They dislocate their jaws?" "It means yawning," Lena said quickly. "They open their mouths wide. It's harmless. It's how they intake extra oxygen after sleeping." On the view screen, as if on cue, Dmitri finished his set of jumping jacks and stood still for a moment, breathing slightly harder. Then his mouth opened in an enormous yawn that showed every single one of his flat teeth, his jaw extending in a way that made the Thernian lieutenant take 3 steps backward. That's not threatening display?" Zurama asked, though her voice carried less certainty now. "No, it's literally just breathing." Lena swiped to another document. "And look, this one covers joint sounds. Audible popping or cracking sounds produced during human stretching are caused by gas bubbles releasing from synovial fluid. This is termed cavitation and is generally considered normal, even pleasurable by human standards." "Pleasurable," Polmuk said over the comm, his voice dripping with skepticism. "The human derives pleasure from making his internal structures produce concerning acoustic signatures." "Yes," Lena was nodding so enthusiastically her whole upper body swayed. "Exactly. He's not deploying bone weapons. He's just being a human who slept in a weird position." Zurama scrolled further through the documents, her expression shifting from combat-ready alertness to something approaching embarrassment. The tactical officer behind her had pulled up his own copy of the files and was reading with widening eyes. "Commander," he said quietly, "there's a whole section here on human exercise routines. Push-ups they're a strength maintenance activity, not combat preparation. Humans do them voluntarily to maintain muscle mass." "They maintain combat readiness voluntarily?" Polmuk asked. "That's somehow worse." "No, not combat readiness. Just fitness." Lena pulled up a video file from the Cultural Archives. "Look, this is from Earth. Educational material about human physical conditioning." The bridge view screen split, half showing Dmitri in his quarters, now touching his toes in a way that made the sensors scream about spinal compromise, and half showing a video of a human fitness instructor leading a class through similar movements. The instructor was smiling. The participants were smiling. Nobody looked remotely threatening, despite engaging in activities that would have triggered every alarm on the luminous dawn. "They bend like that on purpose," Mox said faintly. "For fun." For health, Lena corrected. It prevents injury, maintains flexibility, promotes well-being. It's basic biology for them. Zurama watched both screens, her tactical mind processing the implications. On one side, Dmitri was now doing what the database called toe touches, his hands reaching for his feet while his legs remained straight. On the other side, an entire room full of humans performed the same movement, interspersed with stretches that looked even more anatomically improbable. So when the sensors detected rapid skeletal extension, she said slowly, he was just reaching over his head. Yes. And the temperature spike? Increased metabolic activity from muscle engagement. Completely normal. The muscle density changes. Flexing. They tense and relax muscle groups as part of the stretching process. Zurama closed her 3 eyes and took a deep breath through her primary respiratory intake. When she opened them again, she looked at the tactical officer. "Stand down, containment team." "Commander?" Polomuk's voice carried a note of crystalline confusion. "Stand down, Chief. The human is not transforming into a hostile creature. He's engaging in routine biological maintenance." She paused, "which we nearly responded to with neural dampers and plasma rifles." There was a long silence on the bridge, the kind of silence that occurs when an entire command crew simultaneously realizes they've made a spectacular mistake, and nobody wants to be the first to acknowledge it. Alex broke it. "In our defense, the sensors were very convincing." "The sensors were accurate," Lena said, pulling up another file. "They just didn't have proper context. Human baseline physiology is so different from most coalition species that normal behavior registers as threatening. Look, there's a whole list here of things that trigger false positives. Sneezing, coughing, hiccuping, cracking knuckles, scratching, shivering." "Wait!" Zurama held up a hand. "Knuckle cracking?" "Small joints in their fingers. They can make them pop, too. Some humans do it constantly." Mox looked like he might faint. "They have weapon deployment capability in their manipulator digits?" "No, it's just gas bubbles. The same as the neck cracking. It's harmless." On the main screen, Dmitri had finished his stretching routine and was now pouring himself a cup of coffee. He took a sip, made a face that suggested the recycled water was not improving the flavor, and shrugged in a way that registered as non-specific threat gesture on the sensors that nobody was paying attention to anymore. Zurama tapped her comm. "Polmuk, unlock Habitat 12 and disperse your team. Quietly. We're going to pretend this never happened." "Commander, are you certain?" "The readings were entirely accurate readings of a human engaging in normal post-sleep behavior, which we should have known if any of us had properly reviewed the cultural integration materials." Another pause. Then, "Understood, Commander. My team will return to standard duties. I assume we're not mentioning the plasma rifles in our reports." "What plasma rifles, Chief?" "Precisely, Commander." The comm clicked off. On screen, they watched the blast door to Habitat 12 slide open with a pneumatic hiss that probably sounded very dramatic from inside. Dmitri looked up from his coffee, saw the door was functional again, and nodded to himself. "Engineering must have fixed it," he muttered, completely unaware that 8 armed security personnel were rapidly retreating down the corridor outside. Zurima handed the tablet back to Lena. "Good work, officer. You potentially prevented a significant diplomatic incident." Lena accepted the tablet, her earlier frustration melting into relief. "Thank you, Commander. Though, if I may suggest, perhaps we should distribute this information to all department heads, so this doesn't happen again." "Excellent idea. Prepare a brief for the next staff meeting. Include all the, what did you call them, false positive triggers. I want everyone aware that humans are going to do things that look alarming but are actually mundane." "Yes, Commander." Lena paused. "Should I include the part about how they voluntarily expose themselves to extreme temperatures for relaxation?" "They what?" "Hot baths, saunas, cold plunges. Humans seek out temperature extremes for pleasure and health benefits. It would definitely trigger our thermal regulation alarms." Zurima's upper right hand moved to massage what would have been a temple if Oltani had temples. "Yes, include everything. I want a comprehensive list of every bizarre thing humans do that might make our sensors think we're under attack." Olix, who had been quietly updating the biometric monitoring protocols, spoke up. "Commander, I'm flagging Dimitri's biometric profile with a special marker. Human morning routine exception parameters. It should prevent future alarms for this specific activity pattern." "Good. Though I suspect morning routines are just the beginning." Zurima looked at the view screen where Dimitri had settled into a chair with his coffee and a data pad, looking perfectly relaxed and utterly harmless. "What else do humans do that we should know about?" Lena scrolled through her files. "Well, there's sneezing, which involves forceful expulsion of air, and mucus at high velocity." "Mucus? Protective fluid secretions. It's normal. Anyway, sneezing can reach speeds of over 100 kilometers per hour and is often involuntary and explosive." "Explosive mucus discharge," Mox repeated weakly. "Of course. Then there's hiccuping, which is involuntary diaphragm spasms that produce a distinctive sound. Coughing, which is similar to sneezing, but involves the throat. Yawning we've covered. Oh, and scratching. They do that a lot. And stretching isn't just a morning thing. They do it throughout the day, especially after sitting for extended periods." Zurima was making notes on her command tablet. "So potentially multiple times per shift, any human crew member might exhibit behavior that looks like threat displays or biological distress." "Basically, yes." "Wonderful." Zurama looked around the bridge at her crew, most of whom were still processing the revelation that they'd nearly attacked a crew member for the crime of touching his toes. "Let this be a lesson to all of us. Humans are new to the coalition. Their biology is different. What seems threatening to us might be completely normal for them. We need to adjust our expectations and our protocols accordingly." "And maybe," Olix added quietly, "actually read the cultural files before assuming the worst." "That too, yes." Lena was still scrolling through documents. "Oh, here's an interesting one. Humans also crack their backs, hips, ankles. Basically, any joint can pop. Some humans are what they call hyperflexible and can bend in ways that look physically impossible. There's even a subset who do it professionally for entertainment." "Entertainment?" Zurima said. "They entertain each other by bending impossibly." "It's called gymnastics or contortionism, depending on the specific. I don't need details. Just add it to the brief." On the view screen, Dimitri stood up, stretched his arms over his head again, in a movement that everyone on the bridge now recognized as harmless, and headed toward his personal hygiene station. The sensors dutifully logged the muscle extension and movement, but this time, nobody panicked. Progress. 3 days passed without incident. 3 blissfully quiet days during which the crew of the Luminous Dawn went about their research duties, carefully not mentioning the morning when they'd almost breached a crew member's quarters because he'd touched his toes. Olix had updated the biometric monitoring system with what he privately called the Human Weirdness Patch, a series of exception protocols that prevented normal human behavior from triggering ship-wide panic. Dimitri, still completely unaware that he'd been moments away from getting hit with neural dampers, continued his morning routines with the kind of cheerful obliviousness that probably should have been humanity's official motto. Commander Zurima had distributed Lena's cultural brief to all department heads, which led to a staff meeting that oscillated between educational and deeply concerning. The revelation that humans could voluntarily dislocate certain joints, make approximately 60% of their skeleton produce popping sounds, and considered physical activity a form of recreation had left several senior officers questioning their life choices. But 3 days of peace was apparently all the universe was willing to provide. The alert came through at 13:20 station time, right in the middle of what should have been a quiet afternoon shift. This time, however, the alarm wasn't from biometrics. It was from the Environmental Systems Monitoring Station, where Junior Technician Vess had been performing routine air quality checks in the maintenance duct network. "Commander?" Vess's voice came through the bridge comm with barely controlled panic. "We have a breach in the ventilation system. Something escaped from the xenobiology lab. It's in the ducts." Zurama was on her feet immediately, all 4 arms moving to activate different control systems. "What kind of something, technician?" "A Quilix stalker, Commander, one of the specimens Dr. Nomis was studying. It chewed through a containment field somehow. We're tracking it through the air sensors, but it's moving fast." Polmuk's voice cut in from security. "Commander, Quilix stalkers are Category 4 hostile organisms, highly aggressive, venomous, capable of fitting through any opening larger than 5 centimeters. If it reaches populated areas—" "I'm aware, Chief. Seal off sections 9 through 15. Get a containment team to the ventilation access points. And somebody tell me where that thing is right now." The tactical display lit up with a tracking overlay, showing the creature's movement through the duct system. It was heading toward the habitat modules, moving with the kind of predatory speed that suggested it was very aware there were potential prey items nearby. "It's approaching Habitat Module 12, Olix called out, his eye stalks swiveling in alarm. "That's Dimitri's quarters," Zurama finished. She hit the ship-wide comm. "Dimitri, this is Commander Zurama. We have a hostile organism loose in the ventilation system. It's heading toward your location. Lock yourself in your hygiene facility. It's the most secure room in your quarters. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage." There was a pause. Then Dimitri's voice came back, calm, and maybe slightly confused. Okay? I'm actually in the corridor right now, heading to the mess hall. Should I go back to my room or—" "Negative! The creature is already at your habitat. Find the nearest emergency shelter and—" A chittering sound came through the comm, high-pitched and aggressive. The sound of something with too many legs and not enough appreciation for personal boundaries. Then they heard Dimitri's voice, no longer speaking into the comm, just reacting to something in front of him. "Whoa. Okay, little guy. Easy there." "Dimitri, get away from it," Zurama commanded. "That organism is extremely dangerous." The tracking display showed the Quilix stalker had emerged from a vent approximately 3 meters from Dimitri's location. Security feeds showed the creature, a writhing mass of chitinous legs and snapping mandibles about the size of a small dog, dropping from the ceiling vent and landing on the corridor floor. It oriented on the nearest warm-blooded target, which happened to be one unarmed human in a maintenance jumpsuit. Polmuk's team was still 30 seconds away. 30 seconds that Dimitri didn't have. The bridge crew watched in horrified fascination as the Quilix stalker coiled itself, preparing to pounce. These creatures were ambush predators, capable of taking down prey twice their size, with a combination of neurotoxic venom and surprising physical strength. Against an unarmored human with no weapons, it should have been a massacre. Dmitri looked at the creature. The creature looked at Dmitri. Then Dmitri did something that would be discussed in xenobiology circles for the next 10 cycles. He grabbed a maintenance panel that was leaning against the corridor wall. The Quilix stalker lunged, mandibles spread, venom glands primed. Dmitri, with the kind of casual efficiency that suggested he'd done this sort of thing before, swung the panel like he was swatting an oversized insect, which, technically, he was. The panel connected with the creature mid-leap, redirecting its momentum straight into the opposite wall with a satisfying thunk. Before the stunned creature could recover, Dmitri had the panel pressed against it, trapping it against the wall. He looked around the corridor, spotted a roll of industrial adhesive tape in an open maintenance kit, and with his free hand, managed to secure the panel in place. The entire sequence took maybe 8 seconds. Commander," Dmitri's voice came back through the comm, slightly breathless but remarkably steady. "I think I got it. It's trapped under this panel. You're gonna want to send someone to pick it up, though. This tape probably won't hold forever." The bridge was silent. Not the embarrassed silence from 3 days ago, but the stunned silence of people watching someone do something that shouldn't have been possible with that level of calm. Polmuk's containment team rounded the corner on the security feed, weapons ready, and stopped short at the sight of Dmitri casually leaning against the wall next to a trapped Quilix stalker that was making very angry chittering sounds behind reinforced tape and a maintenance panel. "You," Polmuk said, his crystalline voice carrying a note of something that might have been respect, "captured a Category 4 hostile organism with a piece of sheet metal and tape." Dmitri shrugged, and everyone who'd been in the meeting 3 days ago recognized the gesture now as casual, not threatening. I mean, it's not that different from catching a raccoon back home. Well, a raccoon that's trying to kill you, but the principle's the same. Don't let it bite you. Use what you've got available. Stay calm. "A raccoon," Polmuk repeated. "Yeah, they're these masked bandits. Get into garbage. Real nuisances. Had to relocate a few from my apartment building once." Dmitri noticed the array of weapons the containment team was carrying. "Oh, wow. You guys were really ready for this thing, huh? Is it actually dangerous?" "Its venom can paralyze a Thernian in under 10 seconds, Polmuk said. "Most species experience respiratory failure within a minute of exposure." "Huh." Dmitri looked at the panel with new appreciation. "Good thing I didn't let it bite me then." On the bridge, Zarama found herself experiencing an emotion she hadn't felt in cycles: complete bewilderment. She opened the comm again. "Dmitri, you sound remarkably calm for someone who just faced a lethal predator." "I mean, yeah? It was scary for a second, but once I saw it was about raccoon-sized, I figured I could handle it. We're bigger than it is. That's usually an advantage. Plus, humans are pretty good at the whole tool-using thing. That's kind of our deal." Lena pulled up her tablet again, fingers moving rapidly. "Commander, I'm finding references in the human files. They have extensive experience with pest control, animal relocation, dealing with hostile fauna on their homeworld. It's actually a common skill set." "They regularly encounter hostile organisms?" Mox asked. "Apparently, their planet has a lot of them. Venomous snakes, aggressive insects, large predators. Humans have been dealing with dangerous animals for their entire evolutionary history." Zarama watched the security feed as Polmuk's team carefully secured the Quilix stalker in a proper containment unit, while Dmitri provided helpful commentary about making sure the tape didn't come loose. The human looked less shaken than some of her bridge crew, and he'd been the one actually facing the threat. "Dmitri," she said into the comm, "you were heading to the mess hall?" Yeah, lunch break. After you're done, please report to my ready room. There was a pause. Am I in trouble? Because I can pay for the maintenance panel and the tape if that's the issue. No, you're not in trouble. I just think we need to have a conversation about human threat assessment and response protocols. Okay. I'll be there in like 20 minutes. The comm clicked off. Zurama looked around her bridge crew, at Olix, who was updating his biometric files again, at Lena, who was deep into human behavioral documentation, at the tactical officers who were exchanging glances that suggested they were recalibrating their entire understanding of the species. So, the commander said slowly, the species we nearly attacked for stretching just casually subdued a Category 4 hostile organism with office supplies. Technically maintenance supplies, Olix corrected quietly. Not helping, technician. Lena was still reading. Oh, here's an interesting note. Human threat response includes something called an adrenaline response that temporarily increases strength, speed, and pain tolerance during dangerous situations. It's an evolutionary adaptation that allows them to function effectively under extreme stress. So they get stronger when threatened, Zurama said. Temporarily, yes. It's one of their survival mechanisms. Mox raised a tentative appendage. Commander, should we be concerned that we have a species on board that becomes more dangerous when facing danger? Zorma considered this. Considered the human currently eating lunch after trapping a predator like it was a routine Tuesday. Considered how 3 days ago they'd mobilized an armed response team because that same human had done some morning stretches. No, she said finally. I think we should be grateful, and perhaps adjust our classification of humans from harmless newcomers to deceptively capable allies who are absolutely not to be underestimated again. She pulled up her command tablet and began typing a new protocol update. New standing order. When assessing human behavior, assume competence until proven otherwise. Not the reverse. Noted, Commander, Olix said, already implementing the changes into the biometric system. On the security feed, Dmitri had made it to the mess hall and was collecting what looked like a sandwich and some kind of beverage. He found a table, sat down, and began eating while scrolling through his data pad, the very picture of someone having an ordinary day. Somewhere in the ventilation ducts, maintenance crews were performing emergency repairs. In the xenobiology lab, Dr. Nomus was having a very bad day, explaining how a properly contained specimen had escaped. And on the bridge of the luminous dawn, an entire command crew was coming to terms with the fact that humanity's most terrifying trait wasn't their capacity for violence. It was their ability to make absolutely anything look routine, including things that should, by all rights, be absolutely terrifying. Zurama added one final note to her report. Recommend updating Coalition First Contact protocols. When encountering humans, remember that their casual demeanor is not an indicator of threat assessment accuracy. They simply have a very different baseline for what constitutes an emergency. She paused, then added, also, never underestimate what a human can accomplish with basic tools and a complete lack of awareness that what they're doing should be impossible. In the mess hall, Dmitri finished his sandwich, completely unaware that he'd just become a case study in xenobiology, threat assessment, and why the galaxy really needed to update its understanding of what made humans simultaneously the most confusing and most useful species in the Coalition. He still had no idea about the plasma rifles, and honestly, Zurma thought, it was probably better that way.